Well, good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. It is Friday, June 26th, and today I'm coming to you from an undisclosed location in the Pacific Northwest. Excited to be with you today. It's a great show. We got some news. We've got Priya Gogoi from Celsee Diagnostics. We've got Rene Krantz from SEMI. We're going to continue our benefit risk framework discussion that we started last week and still have time for Q&A from folks later today. So I'm looking forward to getting into it with you. And without further ado, I'm going to do a screen share here of some of the latest news. The first one is what we're hearing from the CDC, and some of you may have seen this, that the director of the CDC is saying that at least 20 million Americans may have had coronavirus. Their current best estimate is that between 5 and 8% of the US population has been exposed, which of course is more than we would have thought by the strict test numbers. But of course, for all those who thought, well, maybe I had it in December or February, I was pretty sure I had it then. The answer is maybe. That's a definite possibility. As they emphasize, though, that leaves more than 90% of Americans who have yet to be exposed and who remain susceptible. So we're still trying to figure this thing out, but it's interesting news out of CDC that confirms some anecdotal things that many of us had wondered about. So they say to date, 2.3 million Americans have had confirmed coronavirus infections, but by the CDC's estimates, the real number could be at least 20 million, which validates what many health researchers were suspecting. So we continue to watch what's happening in the coronavirus infection world. I'm going to bring this news to you also. The University of Columbia Irving Medical Center has done a study, and of course we were talking much about mask sanitization using UVC light, which, as the industry quickly discovered, UVC doesn't do a very good job on textiles when the light can't reach the deeper parts of the textile. But they are starting to find that UVC light in levels not exceeding safe dosages that are already accepted in the industry does a good job of killing coronavirus in the air in rooms that have people in it. And so they say, based on their researchers, based on the results, the researchers estimate that continuous exposure to far UVC light at the current regulatory limit would kill 90% of airborne viruses in about 8 minutes, 95% in about 11 minutes, 99% in about 16 minutes, and 99.9% in about 25 minutes. So it's an interesting option that's coming online there. They seem to be operating within currently accepted limits for UVC exposure. This from Columbia University. And next, I wanted to also remind you, we had Michelle Larkin on a couple of weeks ago, and Michelle told us about, among other things, this Idea to Impact webinar series that Fast Forward Medical Innovation at the University of Michigan is doing. I just wanted to remind you of that. The list is here. You can go to innovation.medicine.umich.edu and get to their webinar series there. They've done Finding Your Why and Key Considerations for Preclinical Development of Therapeutic Innovations. Next week, they're going to be talking about strategies for developing digital health technologies. And so those are some upcoming things that you've got access to. Those are freely available to anyone who wants to tune in. So that's some of the news today. I want to next welcome our friend Priya Gogoi, co-founder of Celsee Diagnostics, to the show. Priya, if you want to make your video live and your audio live. There she is. Welcome, Priya Gogoi, co-founder of Celsee Diagnostics. Priya, it's good to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, Priya, you got your first degree in zoology, and then a master's in molecular biology, and then a Ross MBA on top of that. And somewhere in there, you started a company. Tell us just a bit about your background, where you started out before the Celsee story started.
So as you said, I did my undergrad from India in zoology. Then I got here I married my husband, so I got to Michigan. And then I did my master's in molecular biology from Eastern Michigan. And then after I did my master's, I went to work as an intern in Esperion Therapeutics under Dr. Roger Newton, who, if
Mm,
those of you who don't know, he's a co-founder, he's co-discoverer of Lipitor medicine. So that was a great exposure for me into the startup world. And then when my internship ended and I didn't get the full-time position, I decided to start my own company. That's how Celsee started. As I started it as De Novo Sciences in 2010. And then as we are going to talk about more in detail, every startup, every company has a life cycle. And through the life cycle, after working 7.5 years in 2017 end, I had to let go of Celsee, and I'll tell you the story in details. And then so I did my executive MBA from Ross because I like to have a goal in front of me. I can't be like without goal in my life, right? So that's why, and I just graduated from executive MBA from Ross this year. So
that's great. Well, congratulations on that,
thank
Priya.
you.
So let's go all the way back to 2010. Actually, 2010 is the year that Into Being started and that Celsee started. And so take us back. You, as well as Chris Seamer and Saida Sapiri, started it in 2010. Tell us a little bit about how you guys met and why, especially after after being exposed to the startup world. Why did you think this was a good idea? What was going through your heads?
I was going to joke about it. See, I know that you hear that, oh my God, suddenly a brilliant idea hits you and suddenly it's all nice and cool. You start a company. That didn't happen in real life, at least with me. So what happened was Chris and I were working together at Experian, and we were competing for the same position. And then at the end of it, we were both very dedicated. We were both very hard work. But some things are out of our control. The budget wasn't there. The board didn't agree. So basically, in the end, we both didn't get the job. And it was a very hard thing for me. Before that, I really didn't face failure in my life. So it was the first big shock of a career to me. So, I went very, very low point in my life. But then, my husband reminded me, either you wallow in your self-pity or you create something of your own. So I called up
Hmm.
Chris Simmer from, I knew that he was looking for another job too. So he was looking for another, purpose. He was as motivated as me and we worked great together. So I called him up and I called up my friend from Eastern Michigan. We did molecular biology together. I said, you two come to my house for tea. Um, I have something for you guys. And so the next job was for me to convince them without having an idea. So we started practically from scratch, from nothing.
I
Yeah.
remember talking with you back at that time, and I think sitting in your living room for tea on a couple of occasions, talking
Yes.
about some of the stuff. You guys were very much reaching out, asking a lot of the questions. I think we'll talk about this later too.
Yeah.
You guys were actually asking not only technological questions, but also market questions. What should we be
Yes.
looking at? What would help the world? I remember a lot of questions you guys were asking were, what do people actually need? And we'll get into
Yes.
that later as we talk through the details of Celsee's life cycle. Take us through then. So you were sitting around with Chris and Saida over tea in your house. Walk us through a brief overview of the life cycle of the company, because now, again, just so everyone's aware, the company, was it a month and a half ago, exited to BioRad?
Yes.
So a successful exit to BioRad
Yes.
during the middle of a global pandemic, no less,
Yes.
which I think is pretty cool.
We are very thankful.
But walk us through that. Walk us through the story.
So as I said, we literally, I think we are one of the few companies, and I'm one of the lucky few who have seen from zero to exit. So when we started, actually, my co-founders were under the impression that I had an idea. But very few people know that if you have a team, you can come up with ideas. You sit down. It doesn't strike you, like from the sky. You have to work on ideas too. So we did idea screening. We did and we were open to learning. When you have nothing to lose, you go all out. So we were like that. Our team was like, we knew we had nothing to lose. And really, we didn't have like sky high egos. So we were ready to beg people, request people, to tell us about it. So we learned like even writing business plan. We were scientists. We learned everything from scratch. So in 2010, we started the idea screening. We came up with what are the needs. If there is a market for it, we asked around, local scientists, our market, and then we came up with the circulating tumor cell idea. We had competed for another idea before, but we didn't win the prize. But then, we shifted to quick pivot to CTCs where there was need. We felt by doing our primary research and secondary research. So we did start the company in 2010. But again, I had started it with just $10,000 that I had collected from my internship salary. And I was paying my co-founders and nothing to myself. So we had to survive. And one way we did was, of course, apply to all kinds of grants, but they were slow and we didn't have PhDs to get those grants. So we wrote business plan and we won our first business plan competition in 2011 called GLEQ. It was $5,000. And that kind of gave us the credibility, small credibility, and a lab space in MEDC, MILSIC, Michigan Life Science and Innovation Center. So that kind of jump started, we had a lab space now to work in. And so that's how we built in. Then in 2011, the biggest thing happened for us. We got Kalyan Handik, my husband, to join our company as CEO because, again, none of us the co-founders had the background to go ask for, money. So we won in 2011 the Accelerate Michigan $500K, grand prize, which gave us really the credibility to go out in the community to investors to get money for, our company. And so from there, 2011, really, we went full speed ahead on a clinical path for circulating tumor cells. But
and
again,
Priya, how did you get, I think it's important for the later story, how did you guys settle on CTCs at that point in time? Of course, circulating tumor cells, the cells that are sloughed off by tumors even before the tumors are large enough to detect, and the concept of looking for those. How did you make that decision at that time?
I think that comes through, as I said, the idea screening. So you do a SWOT analysis of the team's capabilities. Right? So we were biologists and we had Handy as our mentor. And we felt like at that point, we were very confident that we can do the cell level. We knew the future is single cell technology. We were very clear about it. So we looked at our strengths and weaknesses and opportunities. The opportunity in US at that time for cells and viewing and making it easy, combining all of those CTCs was that. So.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you touched on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you won in 2011, and then you're off and you're running full speed ahead. What happened next?
Yeah, we thought the sky was the limit, but again, as you know, in startups, expectations and reality is different. So in 2015, we did our clinical trial, but the market cooled off. It was very hot when we started, but then it cooled off around that area. We were lack of resources. We had so few dollars in the bank. Every day was a survival game. Every single day we say, okay, are we gonna survive or not? And you cannot run a clinical trial under those conditions. And then the market was low. We had to understand the reality. Investors were not biting it anymore. So then we again had a major shakeup in 2017. We changed the management. So I will say that, the life cycle, as I said, it's like an S curve. So for a long time, we were going in the green zone, which is, we call the innovation zone, flat structure, less rules, but we had to accept commercialization reality. So in 2017, we pivoted. We pivoted from a clinical to research mode. And then we pivoted our product also, and then changed the management. And then in 2020, we got acquired by BioRad.
That's amazing. So that was in April?
That's April 2020. Yes.
April 2020. Well, congratulations on that. That's amazing. And during the middle of a, like we said earlier, global pandemic, that must have been quite the balancing and juggling act.
Yes.
Well, Priya, take us back to the team that you started with, because I think, like you alluded to, you've watched the whole life cycle, and there's many startup teams that don't get to see all the way through a life cycle, either because the company doesn't make it or because there's such heavy disagreements that people can't flex and make their way through as the company goes through different phases. But take us back to that early team. You and I were talking earlier about strengths and weaknesses, and you alluded to some of your single cell biology strengths that you guys knew that you could talk about that, you could work on that. You knew you had the chops to deal with single cells and deal with the biology. So I guess a little more on the strengths and also on the weaknesses. What looking back, do you say the team had, and what did it not have, and how did you have to grow through that?
I guess looking back, our team was very passionate. I think we had hunger. Hunger is, I think, very key. Everybody talks about it, right? We were so hungry, and we were so, we didn't have anything to lose. That was one of our greatest strengths. All of us were hungry, in the way that we had a chip on our shoulder. We are going against, unproven waters. So it's like a battlefield for us. So that was our greatest strength. Our team worked very well. Our personalities worked very well. We were aligned to the goal where we wanted to go. But I think our greatest weakness was our lack of experience at that time. And we made it up with Handy as our mentor, but still I think that very, very lack of experience in the early team was a weakness. And I would say business knowledge. Even with the mentorship of Kalyan Handy, who's my husband, and he had Handy Lab pass behind it, but we didn't have business background. And I think that's what led me to do my MBA from Ross, because I really felt like if we had the intricate business knowledge, we wouldn't have done a lot of mistakes that we did.
It's interesting. And at the same time, you mentioned the passion, that sort of raw, unbridled, we're going to go conquer the world. People have said that you have to be just a little bit crazy to start a company. And I know in our own business, I had somebody tell me there's no way that this can work. And I guess, they must be right, but we're still here 10 plus years later. And so I look at that and I say to myself, well, how much of that do you look at and do you say, that's just the nature of any group? How much do you say, oh, I wish I had done it differently? How do you look back on that? Do you just say that's just the nature of the beast? Or do you say, would you give different advice to a different company? What would you say to a company today starting up?
Looking back, after I did my MBA, I will tell you something. Initially, yes, passion is needed, because you have nothing, only your passion to guide you. When you start from scratch, you cannot listen to the world that will tell you it's crazy. At that point, you have to be guided by, passion. The team, you cannot be like, oh, we want to make easy money. We will sit here, and just money will come to you. That doesn't work, right? So passion plays a very great role when you start from scratch. But I think as you progress, again, the life cycle plays the role. What I've learned is too much passion also hurts you then. You have to balance it. As I have learned from my experience, it's a term called sunk cost fallacy that I learned. And what that means is when you're too much emotionally attached to a project, then you do not know when to pivot and end it. So that's a danger to over passion that I have learned when I look back. Where we should have pivoted way faster, way, sooner. If I was me at that time, we were so emotionally attached to our project that we stopped listening to the market. Ultimately, the reality is that the market doesn't care how much hard work you put into something. The market needs what it needs. And so your innovation, your product needs to follow what the market wants. You cannot do it with, just because you're emotionally attached to it. So.
You know, that's really interesting to hear you say that, Priya, because as we were noting at the beginning, I remember that you guys were very market driven to start with. So I don't think anyone would have accused you guys of saying you're a product in search of a market, which is a common term that we hear a lot in the startup world. And so it's interesting and very, very gracious of you to say that even there you felt like you could have pivoted sooner. And I think startups need to hear that, because a lot of them will say, oh, we're market focused, and here you're saying, having successfully exited, yes, we were market focused, but we could have been even more market focused in what we were doing. I think that's a fascinating point.
And
well, you talked about some of these pivots. Oh, go ahead, please. Yeah.
No, remember that for the space that we are talking about, the medical innovation space, it's not like a software, right? It goes for at least 10 years for these innovations to come to the market. Markets are changing. It's a dynamic place. It's not, don't expect that what you started with will remain the same at the end. So you have to be smart enough to flow with the market. That's what matters.
That's a good point too, because what you're saying there, I think that what I'm hearing is even if you didn't make any mistakes in where you started, it's still dynamic and it's still going to change. So to admit that we're going to change our direction a little bit isn't admission even of an error necessarily. It's just a changing landscape. Well, tell us a little bit about some of those pivots as you're able to. What sorts of things did you look at and say, we got to change this direction?
So one of the major pivots, as I was saying, came in 2015, the shock, because our culture, the way it was moving, and all our efforts were into a clinical product. And when we started, as I said, we had a market for it. People were showing interest, whatever we were reading, whoever we were talking, it was a very exciting place, but as we moved along, the market, the enthusiasm leveled off. We were too late because of resource constraint. Also, we are in the Midwest. Always, I think the resource constraint also lowered our speed of, how fast we could move. We had a very small team, So in 2015, that was the major point, when finally we were doing our clinical trial, we had to see that this path was not making sense. Even if we do pass the clinical trial, the end, no one is going to buy the product. So the investors, yes. I mean, just because you create a product and pass through FDA doesn't mean success. Ultimately, you have to sell it to the market. Remember that. So that reality hit us, investors, also our board also said that, and we were in a very bad situation at that time, really. It was like either we sink or we move fast. And luckily for us, when you are in the field also, we always knew, remember in the beginning also, single cell is where the need, ultimately where the future is. And for us at that point, we were like, this is the time we go from CTC to single cell. I mean, that means that we have to change the culture again. We have to re-innovate. We have to reorient the company, but we have to pivot. So we pivoted to single cell, where there's high turnaround of technologies, but there was a need at that point. And we could move faster in this time because we had the whole fundamentals of the CTC product already. So it made us move really fast.
Because you were isolating the cells, but then it was a question of, no, we're going to handle one at a time. We're going to grab one at a time, and we're going to give researchers a way to get access to those.
Yes.
No, that was the major pivot of the company. Is that correct?
Yes, that was the first major. And then, as I said, in 2017, another, I would say not technology pivot, but management pivot. From a very science-based leadership, we shifted to more heavily commercialized leadership. So that is also an important thing that, as I said, companies need to be innovative first, like for us tech companies. And then we have to reach to a point where it has to be commercialized. You cannot be in the R&D mode forever. So that's like a death.
You mentioned to me a curve that you have in your mind when you think of the startup life cycle. Can you describe that for our audience?
Yeah, so I will describe. I had a chart, but it's fine. I can picturize it. So the life cycle of a company kind of is like a S-shaped curve, and I will divide it into four sections. The lower part, the beginning small curve is the green zone. Then the acceleration part is the blue zone. Then comes the red zone, and the plateau is usually yellow zone. So the
Mm.
green zone, and that is kind of correlated to the Michigan four color model. The green zone is, I would say, the innovation zone, right? So companies, when they begin, we were flat structure. There were no rules, but that kind of, we were very free. It's a very democratic organization at that time. It's like everyone is a friend, but at the same time, we had, constructive conflict. We were not like agreeing with each other. I think that's also important point. But there was no like strict silos, no silos at
Mm.
all. And then at some point you have to rise up. You cannot be in that mode because that mode is not going to take you anywhere. No commercialization happens, right? To grow the company, then comes the blue phase. By the blue phase, I mean it's the commercialization goal oriented phase. At that time, the company has hierarchy, it has roles. Everybody has to kind of has to have like a defined role and has to have very, very strict commercial goals. That's how you
Mm.
know get, you build your sales team, bring a CEO with, market knowledge, all that stuff happens there. Make the business, partnerships and all. And then you need the red part where it's the process driven. After you have all that, commercialization, you need to make sure your quality works. And you can produce your product 100% of the time. And then, as the company grows and grows, you become yellow or people focus. So that's how very big company, you have the main problem that becomes managing all your diverse people, how to still keep the innovation and growth going with that. And
Mm.
then, yeah,
That's a great model, and I think it says a lot that you guys are able to recognize that and able to adapt to it. Because I feel like I've seen a lot of companies where they're good at one part of that phase, but
yeah,
not the others. And of
yes,
course, to grow a startup all the way from inception to acquisition, you're going to have to deal with all
yeah.
four of those phases.
Yeah, usually you want to
Well,
sell
tell.
your
Mm.
company at the growth phase.
Yes, yeah, they're good in bad times to sell a company. Yeah, very very good. Well, let's do this. I want to save a little bit of time for any attendees to ask questions if they have any. But let's talk about a couple more things here. One is, if you want to just give us the top maybe 2 or 3 lessons that you learned in this life cycle of Celsee. What are the big things that you'd want to communicate to others?
The first thing is sunk cost fallacy, as I talked about. Uh,
Mm.
go with go with passion. Yes, passion is needed, but also think logically when to stop and when to pivot. Very important. And the second thing is have the courage to walk away, to
Mm.
let the tree grow. Startup is like a tree. You have to let the tree grow. And for a tree to become a full tree with fruits and all, you cannot just imagine that you can just take and take. You have to give and give, and have the courage to walk away from the tree and let it grow. So
Mm.
that's something for founders, because not every founder is going to go victory march from the beginning to the end, you know. So that is very important to know that.
That's huge. The analogy is more like farming than it is like what we tend to
Yes.
think of it as. Oh, it's science, it's technology, it's business. But no,
No,
it's more like farming.
no, you are growing your product, you're growing your people with you. It's an organization.
No,
Ultimately,
that's great.
yeah, ultimately organization becomes bigger than the founders.
That's I think we're starting to see why this worked out. So we appreciate those lessons. That's wonderful. Well, tell us, Priya, what are you up to at the moment? What's next for you?
So next for me is multitude of things. So I'm an angel investor now. I also help startups with business planning or any business help, you know. Also, I have started another company. I cannot talk too much about it, but yes, I did. So I have many things on my plate right now. But I do wanna, you know, be involved with the community. I love Milsic, you know, that's the incubator that we come out of. So I love community. Yeah, the startup.
That's awesome. Well, we appreciate your taking the time today to talk to the community and share these stories. And I suppose if anyone wants to get in touch with you and get your wisdom, that's an option. I'm going to take just a minute here and see if we have any questions on the line for you. Feel free to raise your hand if you're an attendee, if you have a question for Priya. I'll give them just 30 seconds to do that. There is a way to raise your hand in Zoom. Got one from Ken Spencer. Ken, you're live.
Yes. So Priya, are you still in Michigan now?
Yes.
So have you gone over to talk to Tech Transfer and looked at being a mentor in residence over there? I mean, they would certainly use your experience.
I have been talking to some people at U of M because through Ross, but I have to continue my talks with them again, that I would be interested in mentorship. Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ken. Appreciate that. Great. Well, this is such a valuable thing. Priya, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on MedTech Crossroads to talk with us, because this is the kind of story that I think we all need to look at and learn from. And I appreciate your grace and your humility in talking about some of the parts where it's like, well, okay, would have done, but you talk about them like they're just part of the course, which I think is one of the biggest part of the messages that everyone needs to hear, which is, I like your analogy. Well, just let it grow. Sometimes you just got to let it grow, and it's gonna do what it does.
Yes.
So we really appreciate that. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
That was awesome. I love how Priya talks about the company, and obviously the successful exit to BioRad. So we're all thankful as a community for that. Next up, I want to welcome Rene Krantz from SEMI onto the call. Rene, you can unmute your line and share your screen. Let's see, is Rene?
I'm here.
There. It sounds like you're unmuted. There you go. Rene Krantz from SEMI. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just wonderful. How is everybody else doing?
We're doing great. Doing great. Go ahead and share your screen. I know that SEMI, do you guys pronounce it SEMI or semi?
SEMI.
SEMI. SEMI has a series of webinars coming up, so I wanted to have you on to tell us just a bit about the organization and also about these webinars that are coming up having to do with digital health.
Okay, I'm trying to share my screen here. Do you see anything?
I think we're almost there. Yeah, we can see it. Just hit the share button.
Okay, I thought I did that. You know, it never works when you want it to work.
It never works when you want it to. Here, I tell you what, I'm going to I'm gonna share it from this one right here. We'll
Perfect.
give everyone 30 seconds to refill their coffee.
That's why you get the slides in advance.
just back up. There we go. All right, we're gonna have this up in just a second.
Okay.
Sorry for the technical difficulty, everybody. We're gonna put that there. Now we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do a screen share. And someone will let me know if this isn't working, but Rene, I believe we've got the I'm going to go past the first slide here. This is the SEMI Brings the World to You slide. Go ahead and tell us about it.
Okay, so I know I have a short amount of time, so I know this is a busy slide. I just wanted to introduce what SEMI is, and then I'm going to kind of narrow it down to my technology pillar that I'm responsible for, and that more or less aligns with what you've been talking about. So basically, SEMI is the Global Industry Association representing the electronics manufacturing and design supply chain from discovery through commercialization. And we've actually just increased to 2,400 member companies, which represents about 1.5 million different professionals worldwide. So SEMI is responsible for the innovation in the supply chain ecosystem. And since 1970, SEMI has basically built many, many connections that have helped its members prosper, create new markets, and address common industry challenges together. So given that, next slide, please. Now this is like, this will make you crazy, but basically this just shows the breadth of the different opportunities that SEMI does offer. And naturally, the first one on the top left is Smart MedTech. That's the group that I'm specifically in. It's a relatively new technology pillar, and it is very exciting. I have never in my entire career been in any type of association. And to be honest with you, I never even heard of SEMI before I joined it. I was always in wafer fabrication, advanced packaging, the electronic side, and then about 10 years ago, I worked at Johnson & Johnson for 10 years in the pharmaceutical industry. So right now, blending the electronics with the medical applications, that is just taking off like a bullet. But I just wanted to show you and share with you the breadth of what SEMI does offer. There's smart manufacturing technology pillars, smart transportation / mobility is really up and coming right now. There's a lot of standards. We work very closely with the government. We work closely with the Department of Defense. You know, we've been very active in this whole COVID-19 disaster. So that's kind of like a high-level overview of SEMI. So we'll break it down a little bit more. So go to the next, oh, perfect. Okay, so what I find as very unique, and it still blows my mind when I go through this, you will see, you know, everybody has all these acronyms, but basically the NBMC portion, which is the first column there, that's Nanobiomaterials Consortium. The focus of that is on flexible wearable human monitoring. And we have invested over $30 million just in that one pillar to universities, to companies. And this is what I find the most novel business model I've ever seen. So basically what happens here is we come up with market needs, industry needs, commercial needs. And we put together a request for a proposal and send it out to multiple companies in academia. We go through the white papers and the proposals, and we will basically select the most novel, innovative applications / proposals that are out there, and we will fund half of their R&D. For example, and I can say this because GE has publicized this. We're working very closely with GE right now on a flexible biometric smart monitor. And let's just say that it was a $3 million effort. We have provided $1.5 million to that project, and we monitor it. We have quarterly project reviews, which are very in-depth, and the reviewers are from the industry. So it's a very broad, smart group of folks that offer direction, recommendations. We had a meeting yesterday, and 3 or 4 other companies suggested having a combined, basically consortium to make sure that the project stays on track, to provide laboratory facilities, to provide manufacturing facilities. So it's bringing a lot of the medical industry aligning with the electronics industry, because as virtual health is exploding, you know, there's a lot of people doing a lot of things in silos. We're trying to bring about collaboration, bringing the right people together. I mean, there's
So you're not only an industry group, you're also providing funding to sort of put those things together.
Exactly. And to me, this is a section of SEMI that is just blowing up right now. If you look at hybrids, over $53 million has been invested. Manufacturing, $181 million investment to date. So when I was first approached to work in this association, I thought to myself, no, I'm not doing this. I'm more product oriented. But they convinced me. And this is the most, I'm telling you, it's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. And a lot of companies that have since joined, they say this is the best kept secret in the industry. So it's very novel, very novel. So that's the part of the funding. I just kind of wanted to introduce to this consortium. And I think we'll go to the next slide because I want to keep us on time here. So this is specifically regarding the Smart MedTech Virtual Workshop Series. And you can go to the next slide. So basically what this is a workshop on biomarker sensing and diagnostics for telemedicine. And we decided to have it over a series of 1 2-hour per week sessions, because I'm not a big fan of sitting in a meeting for 8 hours. I get very antsy. So basically, you know, each week in August, every Wednesday from 10 a.m. to noon Pacific time, we're having these sessions. Session 1 is biomarkers to biochemical sensors. Session 2 is en route care and point of care diagnostics. Session 3 is about human wearables enabling, you know, the rapid decision making in integrated care. Session 4 is automation, augmentation, and AI. And then there will be a virtual tour smattered somewhere in here. We don't have that totally worked out yet. So that's basically.
This is like a classic conference, but you're doing it in a distributed manner.
Exactly. Because a lot of times my understanding is, you know, they did this like one day on site with everybody there. Well, given the conditions of what's happening, we certainly can't do that. So we thought, what's the best way to get the information out? We'll have panel discussions, and you can go to the next slide, because it gives a little bit more information of what exactly is going on. So we have a lot of different speakers. University of California is going to talk about exhaled breath analysis. We have Air Force biomarker discovery, wearable device presentation. What does the future look like of human performance monitoring? We have Pacific Diabetes Technology session, measuring metabolic parameters in interstitium. So it's, you know, we also have questions and panel discussions. So that's all on session 1. If you go to session 2, you'll see the same type of information. We have a speaker from the Air Force on laboratory information, materials information, point of care diagnostics. And it's very interesting to find out how and see how commercial, medical, military are all coming together because there's such a need for this. We had a presentation from Colonel Melinda Eaton, as you'll see below. If you see her presentation, you would flip out as to what their current logistical flow looks like right now. It's very scary. And I'm sure, you know, with everything going on in the world, this is so applicable to today's situation. We have GE they're going to talk a little bit about their project. We're waiting for her title, so that's why you don't see a title there. But a lot of it is in the smart MedTech, virtual health application areas. Next slide, please. And again, we don't have titles all hooked up here, but we have the FDA coming in. We have NextFlex coming in from a manufacturing perspective. This will be all on human wearables, you know, and they're enabling of rapid decision making in the integrated care continuum. I mean, just look at the testing that has gone on for COVID-19. You know, it's been slow. Nobody's ever experienced anything like this. But now that there are tests, how do you get that done quickly? You know, the paperwork and all virtual types of things, very, very interesting. So we'll go to the next slide. I'm trying to keep us on track here, sir.
No, you're doing great. This is fascinating.
Yeah, and the next session will be on automation and augmentation and AI. And we actually have, you know, again, I can update you and send you updated slides once we get the abstract titles. But I think the most excited I'm about is Andreas Kadouf. And he is very well known in the industry as basically as a pioneer in the telemedicine industry. He did a lot of non-invasive wearable sensor technology innovation, and he's on the staff at Amazon right now. And he's a very famous speaker, and I'm very excited to hear, you know, what he has to say, because, you know, Amazon's gonna, before you know it, they're gonna be doing virtual health. I mean, a little scary, but and we'll talk a little bit about, you know, BioFab USA, what they're about, what they do, what they offer, and that type of thing. So that's kind of basically a little bit about the workshop session, and a little bit about SEMI with a focus on the R&D funding part. So that was kind of. Go ahead.
That is great, Rene. I put up a slide here again, the Smart MedTech Virtual Workshop Series that we just went through the daily schedules of. And then also you said there's a virtual tour going to happen, but we don't quite know the details of that yet. But very, very cool. I believe we actually had a question for you here. Let me see if our question asker wants to come live. Can you raise your hand if you had a question and you want to ask it live? Otherwise, we can do it remotely.
I also included my email address. If anybody has any questions or you just want to chat, feel free to reach out. And I know, thanks to Gene, I already had several conversations with the folks from University of Michigan, and I have some next week. So I'm calling him Gene the Matchmaker.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I've always admired matchmakers. Well, and I'm thankful. Rene, we've got a question here, which is contact info. You said you shared the email. If you can share it in the chat box, that would be great. And also, if anyone needs Rene's email, obviously just reach out. We'll get it to you. The question here was specific product and funding questions, as well as can we follow up with you next week? So I think the question is basically, what are you guys looking for when it comes to discussions, product areas that you guys are interested in?
Well, what we want to do is focus on innovation. A lot of times you don't know what you don't know. So we're looking at, you know, it's all related to, you know, smart MedTech applications, wearables, sensors, biomarkers, biometrics, manufacturing, commercializing all these medical technologies. There is so much out there that people don't even know about. For example, you know, I didn't even know this was available. A patch that when you're biking or hiking, you put on your arm and it measures your hydration. So there's an alarm that goes off, rehydrate. You know, I don't see that for sale anywhere. Same thing with, you know, continuous blood pressure or heart monitoring. You know, if you're gonna have a virtual health appointment with your physician, You could put this on for 2 days. You don't have to go into the office. This will automatically be transferred over to their network and they will monitor you. So, and you don't see that stuff, you don't go to the CVS or whatever, or pharmacy and pick that stuff up. So there's so many things that are available that I've just been aware of. So, it's a lot of trying to bring all these folks together in the medical industry and the electronic industry, collaborate and make it real, make it from discovery through commercial, through market availability. So I hope I answered.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think so. And I think maybe it also bears repeating. I mean, you guys represent the semiconductor industry. So really, I think if I understand correctly, you guys are looking for interesting medical applications of semiconductor technology. And so the conversation at this point can be relatively broad because you guys go so much beyond MedTech, but certainly for you personally and for the organization, that's a hot button topic. Is that a fair?
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. That's why you're CEO of your own company. And I put information there, my email, so feel free to reach out. Even if you want to get on like the RFP list, which will be coming out in the September timeframe, we usually list, the topics that we're interested in, and hey, just take a look at it. Great.
That's wonderful. Well, Rene, thank you for presenting today. Rene copied her email to the chat here, rkrantz, RKRANTZ at SEMI.org. Well, Rene, thanks for being with us and on so many of the other calls too. I appreciate having you on these, and I'm glad we could have you share a little bit about this. We will keep this in front of people, just like we did with FFMI's webinar series. We want to keep all the options out there for folks, and we will let that be known.
Sure, and if there's anything else you ever want me to talk about, I'm a talker, so feel free to, to let me know if you need something to fill the time. Because I could even go through, here's a list of our current 20 projects that we're doing, that type of thing. So feel free to reach out. Thank you for including me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being with us, Rene. Really appreciate that. Thanks again. Great. Yeah, it's wonderful to hear about these things that are happening in the industry. I think it's one of the things we've been so surprised by ever since we started with COVID Connect and then transitioned to MedTech Crossroads is the number of things that are popping out of the woodwork that we've learned about that, it's right next to you and you wouldn't have had an opportunity to hear about it unless you'd had a chance to bump into those people. And that's obviously one of our goals. We've been so pleased with the number of connections that have been made through this. I want to do just a little share with you to finish up the benefit risk discussion that we were having last week. And so I'm going to share the factors to consider. If you recall, this is a document that FDA created, a guidance document that they created in 2016. And it came in really handy during this COVID crisis because it really explains not only FDA's normal thinking, but also how to think about the availability of products in strange situations. And of course, we've just had a very strange situation. And they basically implemented this document, although they didn't necessarily advertise it. We talked last time about analyzing benefit and analyzing risk and FDA's basic approach and the question of harmonization to 14971 from the perspective of risk analysis. I just want to touch on a couple of things today to close out our review of this guidance document. FDA says, in addition to considering the inherent benefit risk, and remember, that's patient-focused benefit. What does the patient think and feel the benefit is? There are a couple of other factors to think about. One of those is uncertainty. How much uncertainty is inherent in what we're going to go through here? Are there mitigations available to the risks? Risk is risk, but if you can mitigate it, that makes it better. Is it detectable? Are the errors detectable, or will they be hidden and we'll suddenly discover that we'd had a problem? What is the failure mode that the device might go through? Is it something that, and they give examples here, intermittent electrical connection may indicate a different cause of the nonconformance than an error in the wiring design. One we might be able to fix by retooling some products. The other one may be an inherent flaw in the design. And so that comes into the analysis of whether we can and should mitigate and press forward. The scope of the device issue, how big is does it affect multiple lots? The impact on the patient, preferences regarding availability, the nature of the violations of the non-conforming product. Was it systemic in nature or non-systemic in nature? And then also the compliance history of the firm. If a firm has been doing great and there's this question of should we let this product keep going out, that's going to weigh into it as well. These are all very common sense things, but it's good to see that FDA has always put these down and said this is how we're operating. And like we said before, we saw this in spades during the emergency use authorization process that we all just went through with COVID. I want to take you down here to two examples. FDA gives a bunch of examples in this document, but I'll take you down to two examples, and I think you'll find these informative. One is an example where FDA said, we're not going to let that device stay on the market. Something's up, we're not going to let it stay on the market. The other one is an example where they said, we are going to let it stay on the market, despite the fact that not everything was just business as usual. Here's the first one, the malfunction of a pregnancy test with low benefit and moderate additional risk. Now, if you think about the test we were just talking about last week, the ChemBio antibody assay that just got revoked, you will see that this follows a very, very similar playbook. Here's the background. They discovered that the device, in this case a pregnancy test, has a higher rate of false positives than were expected, okay? And it also is the case that there were many similar pregnancy testing devices on the market, so availability wasn't an issue. It wasn't like if this test went away, there would be nothing. There were many out there. Can you guess where this is going? The benefits are there. They're the benefits of a pregnancy test, but the risk is that false positive results could delay the treatments that you might otherwise undergo thinking that you weren't expecting a baby. And some of those treatments might be medically necessary. So you might actually make decisions about your healthcare that are different based on the results of that test or not. And the firm did not identify any other mitigation other than to pull the tests from the market. It was particular lots of the product, and the only mitigation was to pull them from the market. So guess what? FDA found the benefits to patients for the device with the malfunction to be low, and the result was that the firm ended up notifying the retailers and distributors and removing the affected lots. Now, you don't think of a pregnancy test as being a high-risk device or anything like that, but in this case, the decision was made because there were higher false positives for certain lots. It was time to remove that device from the market. Let's look at another example. This is a radiation therapy device, but the benefit is high, and there is increased risk. And we think of exposing people to radiation as being a relatively dangerous thing. Oh, if there's anything wrong with it, we wouldn't want to do that. But look at the benefit. Both pre-market data and real-world evidence indicates that the device is 80% more effective at treating certain types of aggressive cancers than other technologies on the market. That's a pretty big benefit. And if there's nothing else out there that can even touch this, maybe we need to consider leaving it on the market. What's the mitigation? Well, the pregnancy test didn't offer any mitigations except for pulling the device from the market. In the case of this device, the manufacturer proposes updating its labeling, basically with respect to accuracy of the device and to include a warning regarding the increased risk of healthy tissue damage. We may damage more tissue, but we're still 80% better than anything else at defeating these particular types of cancer. And so the patient impact is that, yeah, we're taking a risk of more tissue damage than we thought, but there's a pretty big benefit. And so the conclusion, FDA found the benefits of the device to be high in this situation, given its more effective treatment of aggressive cancers compared to other available technology. Although the risk of damage to healthy tissue appears to be higher than expected in a subgroup of patients, the additional warning that the manufacturer proposes to add to the labeling will help identify patients who may be affected by this risk. So there was a recall action, but the recall action was just to add some labeling changes. So your gut says, we're dosing somebody with radiation. oh, if there's anything wrong, we've got to pull it. No, it's not necessarily the case. You can see from these two examples why something as seemingly simple as a pregnancy test, or in the case of a COVID antibody test that's giving high false positives and high false negatives, may be worth pulling from the market, whereas a radiation dosing device that's actually doing a really good job, but it's just different than we thought, may be worth leaving on. And so those are two of the examples that FDA gives. There are other examples in this document if you'd like to see more. As a reminder, this document is not about the standard run-of-the-mill 510K process. This is about the availability of devices in sort of unusual situations, either things like we saw with the emergency use authorizations, or in situations where a device is available, but something has changed about it. It's not what you expected it to be, or a new use of it becomes apparent. And the question is, should we let it continue to be used? Should we let it be used in these new situations? And this is some of the thinking that goes into that. There are some other neat sections in this which I will not cover because of time, but remember that FDA notes the harmonization and the lack of harmonization with 14971. This is something that you will find over and over again, is that sometimes certain regulatory groups look at things just a little bit differently about a certain topic. You'll find this in software, where the international consensus standard for software lifecycle management is a little bit different than FDA's guidance for software lifecycle management. So you have to be aware of the differences while still realizing that the basic philosophy is really become quite harmonized, not only in the US, but internationally as well. There's also a useful table down here that's a worksheet for identifying factors that may be considered in the assessment of benefit for product availability, compliance, and enforcement decisions across the total product lifecycle. So this is interesting reading for anyone engaged in medical device development. More specifically, if you're part of a company or you know a company that has a reason to think that their product might have an additional use that's already on the market but might have an additional use, or that is in danger of getting pulled because some things aren't what they thought they were, this is definitely a guidance you want to spend some time with. And so with that, we'll conclude those two sessions on this guidance document, which is entitled Factors to Consider Regarding Benefit Risk in Medical Device Product Availability, Compliance, and Enforcement Decisions, issued in 2016, but obviously very useful all the way through the EUA process, which FDA still has ongoing on certain classes of devices relative to COVID-19. And with that, I want to give a brief moment for any of our participants to ask a question. Feel free to raise your hand if you have a question about any of the things that we've covered. Or if you have, like Rene, any event that's coming up that people should know about, we would love to know about that. I'll just give another 30 seconds for that. It was really great to hear today. I'm just going to let our friend Ken Spencer on momentarily here. Ken.
Yeah, so Gene, again, thanks. Another great collection of folks there. And actually, we're going to talk to Rene. The insert folks are going to talk to Rene next week because we have a lot of things going on that she would be interested in. But on a separate topic, we've been looking for 13485 folks to manufacture some of the devices that we have out there. And one of the things that we've discovered is that ISO requirement is really close to some of the other ISO requirements that they have to do for automotive or semiconductors and stuff. The gap analysis is like really small. And I'm just wondering if there's anybody looking at how to converge all those things, to make it less of a hurdle for companies, to work on these products that, have already been working under very stringent ISO things to automotive, for instance,
That's a great question, Ken. We could talk about it for a little bit here, and then if you have any other questions, we could certainly follow up afterwards. But you're absolutely right. There are many, many similarities. If you're used to working under a quality system, chances are that there's a lot of things you'll recognize if you're looking at 13485 or 21 CFR 820, the US FDA quality system regulation. And of course, even 820 and 1345 are not the same thing. We see a lot of companies get tripped up because they say, oh, I need somebody who's 1345 registered to build my product in the US. And the answer is, no, you don't. Is it useful? Yes, it can be. But does it cover you for quality systems? No, it doesn't. And that's a widespread misconception because it's not even the same standard, as you alluded to, as the US QSR, which applies to the company that is putting the product on the market. So the company that owns the product is the one responsible for 21 CFR 820 compliance. And that's a really, really important point. So a lot of companies will get trapped into thinking, oh, if my manufacturer has 1345, then I'm good. And the answer is no, it's simply not true. But FDA and international organizations are all very interested in harmonization. There have been many efforts at harmonization. One of the challenges we're up against in the US is that 21 CFR 820 and much else is ensconced in federal law. It's not something that they can just, FDA can just say, we're going to get rid of. So FDA has had programs at various points. There was a program, we'd have to check on the availability of it now, where a company that's already internationally registered with ISO 13485 can have a year of grace bringing their product to the market in the US. That was a program that was there before. I don't know if it's still active today. And there are efforts at harmonization, but most of those are relatively incomplete. And it will probably be a relatively long process before the level of harmonization that we'd like to see will happen. I interviewed Jeff Shuren, who's the head of Center for Devices and Radiological Health, about a year ago in Grand Rapids. And we had exactly that question. How long will it be before we can just comply with 1345 and be okay in the US? And many great intentions and a lot of hard work going into it, but he alluded to the fact that it's going to be a while yet for that. As far as the harmonization with automotive standards, we've found that understanding them is useful to the people who then need to implement the medical ones, but you can actually get into a lot of danger if you too closely harmonize your systems, because then you'll find that procedures from one system, like a medical system, refer to procedures in the other system, and then your auditors get really confused because they're like, I thought we were building syringes over here, and now I see something talking about a steering wheel. How am I going to audit this? So harmonization is good. You have to decide where those lines are for your particular company and how you're going to implement it. So we can talk offline if there's more questions about that, but if you do have a question, I'd be happy to answer it here real quick, Ken.
Thanks, Gene. That's very good. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Great question, getting right to the meat of the issue. Well, not seeing any other questions here today. I want to thank you all for being with us on MedTech Crossroads. I want to remind you, next week, we do not have a show. It's July 3rd. It's the observed Independence Day. So there's not going to be a show on Friday, July 3rd, but we will be with you the week after as normal. Looking forward to it and looking forward to seeing each one of you. Thanks for being here today. Goodbye.